Four, three, two, one. We are live. Hello and welcome to PropTechBuzz. PropTechBuzz is the world's only new age digital marketing platform that combines the power of media, products, leadership, and community. And especially when I'm giving an intro about what PropTechBuzz is, I feel why should I talk when I can show, right? So let me quickly show you what PropTechBuzz is all about. So as I said, we are a combination. We are a new age digital marketing platform. There's nobody else that combines the power of media. Yes, we are a media house. We have an editorial team, a research and writing team that culls out most interesting, innovative prop tech stories from around the world. We don't write about real estate. We only write about prop tech. We only talk about exciting new products that are emerging from all over the world. We capture stories all the way from Vietnam to Canada to Saudi Arabia. We have a prop tech coming from Iraq as well, right? So we do that, and we publish on our media channel, which is here. So from Global PropTech. So do subscribe to our content there. So we combine media and then we have products, right? So our platform is filled with close to 800 products and growing by the day. And each of these products have a landing page where you can see what the product is all about. You will be able to see the screenshots. You will be able to see what problem the product is, how they are solving it, and then you can engage with them right here. As you can see, there's Miro. He launched Office R&D, and then the community can engage here. And not just that, you can see who the person is behind, who the founders are, right? So here it is Office R&D. The CEO is Miro, and then you can go and look up on what Miro, who's Miro, and what does it do. You can follow him, and then in the next 2 weeks, you will also be able to DM him. Yes, we are introducing direct messaging, so that the entire community gets to talk to each other. And so that's about the product side. Every day we launch around 6 to 10 products globally. As you can see here, there are few products that launched just now, and these launches happen on the 24-hour cycle. So now it's already 4 hours gone, and these are the a few products that launched today, and you will be able to upvote them and show them your support. And on the right hand side are people who are online. Okay, so I see that Gene, I had a conversation with him. He is the founder and CEO of Let.us. I just had a conversation. And then there's Manjunath, is the founder and CEO. Yog is the founder CEO of PropTech Austria. So as you can see, some really cool people online. And not just that, you can actually go to the discussion board and engage there. As you can see, we have close to 2,500 members on our platform. Out of them, we have VIPs, which are 146 VIPs till today. Out of 2,400, we have 146 VIPs, and these VIPs are CEOs, founders, VCs, investors from all across the globe, and they have a private VIP room where the quality of conversation is really high because this is between the founders, and the engagement is really really cool, and and then deriving a lot of benefit out of it. Did I miss anything else? I don't think I missed anything else, but do check out if you're a founder or a co-founder, and if you have not yet launched on our platform. We are not just a listing platform. No, you don't list. We actually promote you, and that too for free. All right. We obviously have premium features as well. 10% of our launches are premium, but most of it is free. So please come over and join this platform. We have a lot to offer. With that, let me just introduce my guest today. My guest is Mitch, and Mitch has spent the majority of his career at the intersection of technology and real estate. And he started his career as a real estate developer, and then he turned real estate broker and property manager, and eventually found his way into PropTech space a decade ago. More recently, he was the co-founder and chief product officer of SmartRent, a PropTech company that went public in 2021. Over the course of 6+ years at SmartRent, he developed and scaled the hardware products to over 500,000 homes and software suite to millions of users. He is currently an advisor for Conservation Labs, an AI company that developed a groundbreaking platform that decodes audio data and actionable insights in the built environment. to reduce emissions, energy consumption, and water usage. So as you can see, he's no ordinary guest, because I do not think I have ever interviewed somebody who has built a company from scratch and that went public and achieves so much scale. So there's a lot to learn from him today, and I'm thrilled to have him on my podcast today. So Mitch, welcome to PropTechBuzz. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's great to be here. And Ravi, thank you and the team at PropTechBuzz for all you do. Over the years, you've built a great platform, and yeah, it's exciting to be here. I'm happy to talk to you today.
I'm as thrilled, especially I'm a product guy. Always, I think two product people, when they meet, they geek out a lot. But I will try to control my excitement here and stick to the script. What part of your career trajectory did I not share that you would want to fill in and share it to the audience here?
Yeah, you did a pretty good job with the description, so appreciate that. But I'll try to fill in some gaps and add some color. Dating back to my college years, I had a really interesting college time where I started out wanting to be an architect. Midway through college, I transitioned to wanting to become a real estate developer, and actually worked almost full time for my last 2 years in college as a developer. So I got lucky to have that experience. And then I graduated in 2008, which was a pretty terrible year for real estate, housing development and construction in the US, kind of led into the Great Recession. And by that the end of that year, the industry had basically collapsed. So there's a lot of carnage, and everybody lost their jobs in real estate development and housing. And I was in Arizona, which was pretty much ground zero for all of this. So it was a tough transition leaving college at that time. But amidst all of that, there's a light, in the technology space where the Apple App Store had just launched. The iPhone had launched the previous year. The App Store had came out, and it brought this whole new industry of independent developers that could build and launch apps on their own and at scale. The App Store created this distribution channel that had never really been seen before. So in those 4 years of starting college and ending college, I kind of went from wanting to be an architect to developer to now a software developer. So I actually taught myself code, but realized I was not really a great programmer. I'm not that smart. And I attempted to build a few apps for the App Store, launched them, got some traction, but made no money, not enough money to make a living. And then I got my real estate license, sold some real estate, so I was able to make some money. But while I was selling real estate, I still stayed around the tech space. I built some websites for some real estate agents and brokers. And then that kind of just got me thinking about how you can leverage technology to solve real estate problems. So just getting ingrained in that software development world really helped me understand the ways that technology could now solve real estate issues. And that's kind of one of my biggest transitions in my life, I'd say, is I was so comfortable and focused on just being a real estate developer and not really understanding how amazing technology can do for real estate. So that's probably a piece that I don't always share, but I like to share that.
That's amazing. So you taught yourself to become a techie. You were not a techie to begin with. Am I right?
No, there's obviously some tech that just technological thinking that goes into architecture, but I never really became a professional architect. So yes, I tried my hardest to teach myself a few programming languages, but I didn't do a great job at that in terms of making that as a profession. But that led me into becoming a product manager and understanding that profession pretty well.
Excellent. No, I consider a product manager also to be a techie, because you need to shape, you need to work, you're a cross-functional person. You need to get the business, you need to get the tech, you need to get the operations, sales, everything together. So that takes a special person to become a good CPO. Excellent. Great. Thank you for sharing that piece of your journey. Let's now dig into the meatier stuff. The meatiest of the theme for today is multifamily. Okay, how technology plays a role in multifamily. And since you have seen a decade and or more of this space, why don't you give us a lowdown of how multifamily has evolved over the years and the path forward?
Yeah, and I also like to give a quick shout out to a previous guest, Matt Knight. You guys talked a little bit about this topic a couple of days ago, and it really started. the term prop tech, I don't think I heard it until about a decade ago. There was obviously real estate software prior to that. So we got to give kind of a shout out and an homage to the original companies. I think MRI started over almost 50 years ago or so. I think this year is Yardy's 40th anniversary. So, the real estate software space dates back 4 decades plus. And so that's kind of really where the industry began. It wasn't called PropTech then, but that's really the original companies that built software for the space. And then when the dot-com internet boom came around in the late 90s, you saw a few more property management systems come out. RealPage launched, Appfolio, and Entrata launched. And then also at the same time, the internet listing services, so you had apartments.com, rent.com, apartment guide, and then the internet listing boom, became a big thing in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then, of course, when mobile came, that's really when renters, the residents, started using the software more to interact with the property managers in a much more efficient way. So they were able to pay rent. They were able to lease things. They were able to do online leasing, which was a huge change for the industry. Before, you had to physically go bring documents or email documents, and it was a really messy process to just even apply and lease an apartment. So the ability to do all that remotely, take photos with your phone, to upload documents easily that way, to pay rent online, and of course to submit maintenance requests all through the app. That whole process took off really wildly, in the early 2010s. But something else happened during that time frame too, which is interesting, is the property management systems, the big incumbents, the names I named earlier, they started to gobble up some of those point solutions. So they started creating these really wide-ranging ecosystems, legitimate platforms now, and we're able to have this monopoly style bundling power, kind of like the Microsoft model, where hey, you buy my core accounting software, now you get this product, this product, this product for a little bit cheaper because you're bundling everything together. So that was a really interesting time. And then that's when I kind of started jumping into this space around the 2014, 2015, when I like to call it the smart building movement. And I might be biased because I was building products during that time, but it was a really pivotal movement for the industry because it was really taking all of these kind of offline, disconnected, or dumb pieces of hardware, whether it was a door lock, a thermostat, and bringing all those online. And it really kind of I kind of break this down to 3 sections, which is home automation, access control, and Wi-Fi for buildings. The home automation was core to what we built at SmartRent, where we were able to take a lot of the great devices that had been built over the previous couple of years. The smart home for consumer industry really took off 2010 to 2015. You saw Nest, Philips Hue, the Amazon Alexa came out. So you saw these really great devices for consumers in that space. And we brought those to the enterprise. We brought those to multifamily. So that was really the big movement that came there. On the access control side, we were really able to bring all that hardware that actually already existed at the property, but just built it in a much better way, created new integrations on top of that. So it took the kind of the dumb access control systems and integrated them into the property management systems. That was a really key beneficiary for the industry, was really to get automated access control to give people temporary credentials, whether you're leasing, whether you're performing maintenance. So that was a really key part. And then the last part of the smart building movement was Wi-Fi, getting connectivity to buildings and taking what was traditionally a pretty broken model, in my opinion, where you'd have to go and ask your local ISP to come to your apartment unit, install a wireless access point. Very messy process. Once you left your apartment, you couldn't get internet. So that was really the third leg of the smart building movement that kind of took off during that time frame.
Got it. Excellent. I've never heard the evolution so distinctly, so clearly ever before. Great. So that is a great context setter. That is a great foundation over which we can now talk about what does it take to succeed as a technology player in multifamily. So let's understand that from your experience, from your own experience of your product journey of building and launching products at scale. Because scale is also, see, the thing is, Startups come and go, people build and they survive and they try to achieve some modicum of success, but not everybody achieves scale. Okay, not everybody achieves growth, and you are one such individual who have seen that success at scale. So help us understand your product journey of building and launching products at scale through your experience.
Yeah, I would say I was pretty fortunate in two reasons. One reason is I was a property manager, in a previous, few years before building the software for property managers. So as a rule of product management, empathy is the best thing possible. If you can be your user, if you can actually perform the jobs and tasks of your user, then you understand exactly what they're going through and what they need, so you can iterate faster. So I'd say I had a fortunate opportunity to be able to do that prior to building software for property managers. Second, and this is before we started SmartRent, we worked for a large real estate operator that was building software in-house. And that's pretty rare. There's not a lot of large real estate owner operators that build software in-house. Some do, but at the time, we got to build an entire custom end-to-end software platform and this was a large single family company. And so we did a lot of things there that we were able to iterate really fast because we had our property managers. They were basically like my colleagues, property managers. So I could iterate with them. I could empathize with them really, really quickly. So we were fortunate to be able to build a lot of these tools that SmartRent eventually built, but we built them for an in-house company. So kind of first, number one is, like, if you can be, the first lesson is if you can go become your end user, especially in the enterprise world, that's great. You have a leg up. Transitioning from single family to multifamily has some challenges, but also has some benefits. Multifamily, the database architecture of how properties and units are constructed is pretty standardized. It's been like that for a long time. So when you're building a piece of software, you really want to mimic it on top of how Yardi, RealPage, and Trada, how these big property management systems, how their architecture works, because you ultimately will need to integrate with them at some point if you want to get some of the largest customers. So the nice thing is they already have a database model that you can essentially build upon. When it comes to hardware, however, multifamily presents a lot of different challenges than in the single family space. Single family homes, they're typically built out of wood frame construction. There's typically good cell reception. The door locks are typically all the same. Some of the thermostats might be a little bit different, but the hardware components are fairly similar. You get into multifamily and you've got these glass high-rise buildings. You've got, garden style low-rise properties. You got a lot of different aspect types and property types in multifamily. And so there's kind of a funny story in the industry that we used to talk about, where actually the fancier, the sexier, the more architecturally appealing the building is, these 50-story glass buildings in downtown areas, they actually block radio frequency. And so that it makes cellular connectivity actually troubling in some areas in the building. So the nicer the building, sometimes the harder the radio frequency is to penetrate through walls and whatnot. So that presented some challenges when you're transitioning. So that's kind of just like the base layer of when you're moving into multifamily and especially you're building products. You really want to think about how to build a core foundational product. This is more from a hardware perspective that really can solve for the masses. You really need to understand what the multifamily, at least in the US, what it really is mostly built upon. And yes, you see these nice skyscrapers in downtown areas, but the reality is the majority of multifamily is low rise, 2-3 level wood frame construction garden style property. And beyond that, you also need to build for multiple connectivity types. So what I mean by that is you need to be able to have a cellular connection if needed. You need to be able to use the building's Wi-Fi. So you need to be very flexible in this. When we launched SmartRent, we noticed that there's already a few companies in the industry. One company was building a really, really nice lock themselves that really only solved a small use case. It really wasn't a device that you'd put in a Sunbelt state garden style building. It would be in a really nice high rise building.
Right.
There was another company that built their system to only work on cellular, not to work on Wi-Fi at all, which can be challenging. There's another company that didn't build cellular connectivity at all, so they kind of alienated themselves. We saw all these companies that were just kind of alienating themselves into these smaller buckets and weren't really solving for the masses. And so we decided to go out and, it took a little bit of extra engineering effort up front, but we, in the long run, it paid off because we were able to deploy the majority of properties throughout these our customer portfolios. So that's just kind of the lessons learned when building. There's some key things when you're trying to find the right partner or the right customer to launch your product.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by the right customer is you don't want to just launch with somebody who is excited about your product. It sounds great at the surface, nor you want to just say yes to the pilot customer that's willing to pay you list price or whatever that may be.
So when you say customer, who's the customer when it comes to multifamily? Is it's obviously not the homeowner; it is the property manager. Am I right?
Yeah, and yeah, I know we're going to talk later about how to sell to multifamily and what the persona of multifamily looks like, but especially when you're building an enterprise product that's hardware related, you need to be talking to the corporate ownership of the group. So the way multifamily is traditionally set up is you have a corporate team, and then you have your property site staff, and then you have the residents. So in the instance of when you're building a home automation smart building product, you're typically selling to the corporate team because they're responsible for paying the CapEx and having the budget for that.
Got it.
So when I talk about the right customer, you want to find somebody who can actually give you great feedback. They're kind of in the trenches with you when you're first launching. I like to call this bi-directional empathy. Obviously, when you're building a product, you need to empathize with your customer, but you almost want to have your customer empathize with you too. What I mean by that is you want them to know where you're at in your product saga. You want them to know that, hey, this is V1 of the product, and you need to be giving me feedback very often and quickly, so I can iterate for you. When you're small, you're able to be agile, so you can have smaller, quicker sprints. You can do hot fixes and do product launches once a week or even more than once a week if necessary. So you need to pick somebody and the right customer that's got it going, wants to go through this process with you. And then lastly, when it comes to scaling, when it comes to hardware, or so when it comes to software, scaling is just a matter of whipping up some more AWS servers, buying some more credits, getting the right engineering teams in place to do some site reliability, all that stuff. But when it comes to hardware, it's a totally different ballgame. You ideally want to launch in your kind of your home city or home state, so yourself and your teams can visit the property and physically see the devices, go troubleshoot the devices. But when it comes to expansion regionally, you obviously need to have strong, reliable boots in the ground. You need to have a really reliable network of field operations and field installation and field support. And so that can kind of come in two ways. You can do a lot of that stuff in-house, and you can do a lot of that stuff completely through third-party companies. And it all really depends on how fast you want to grow. If you do stuff in-house, you can kind of grow at your own speed. So if you have a large customer or potential customer that wants to do their entire portfolio and retrofit, 50,000 units, you want to be able to control that speed more. So you may want to do more stuff in-house for them. If you want to go the opposite route and rely more so on third-party companies, that's a great route as well from a internal cost efficiency perspective. But then you're kind of giving up some of the customer touch, and you're also allowing those third-party companies to run with the schedules a little bit more. So it's kind of a trade-off. It just kind of depends on how fast you want to go. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. It just kind of depends on what your company goals are. But what I will emphasize is if you are building a hardware product, you need to have reliable local field support. So when something goes wrong, they can visit the property, they can troubleshoot it. And of course, if you have a new opportunity in a market, you want to be able to rely on somebody to be able to go and install that pretty quickly.
Excellent. I think it was very, very valuable. You touched upon. I began to ask you about selling. You can build the best product. You can have the best strategy, but selling is where the rubber meets the road, right? What has been traditionally a challenge to sell to multifamily, and is this becoming harder and harder with time because the options are far too many? And is there a problem of too many for the buyers to make up buying decision? Could you give us a sense of the challenges to sell to multifamily?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Your second question in terms of just the volume of options is definitely a challenge. I'll get to that, but let me first just talk about the kind of core challenges of selling to multifamily. First off, is just really understanding how the industry operates. It's a very unique industry, and I'll reiterate what I said, a few minutes ago about you have to understand that whether you're selling to the corporate, to the corporate teams or the property staff or the resident, you regardless of who the end actual customer is in there or the end user, you still really need to go through corporate. You can try to go backdoor through the property staff. You can try to sell direct to residents, but that's not really a great way to do it without the involvement of the upper chain. And when you're thinking about corporate, there's various different really corporate personas. One is an owner operator, so that's a company that actually owns and operates the real estate. And those are typically really your for hardware selling. You want to go after those companies because they can write large checks for capex. You have a second segment of property management companies, and they're typically they may be called fee managers or third party managers, and they really just take a kind of a fee to manage the property. They can't write big checks. They can't go and say, "Hey, I want to install home automation or access control or Wi-Fi." They need the owner to essentially foot the bill for that and get the owner involved. And then kind of the third group is the developers. Most of the developers will build the building, and then when they lease it up to a certain point, they sell it off to another owner entity. And why that's unique is because a lot of the developers won't really think about how the property necessarily operates after they sell it. So they'll do things and they'll decide things that really just help themselves. So when they're making decisions about hardware or other products, it's really about how is that going to help me today and just to lease this building up, and not so much how is it going to help me 5 years from now. So those are kind of the three major personas. And so just really understanding who you're trying to sell to, what your product is, and who the right target audience is. And then beyond that, you really want to understand what their goals, objectives, and intentions are. Obviously, everybody talks about ROI and payback periods, and those are pretty easy definitions and things to think about. But when it comes to real estate, and especially multifamily, you need to understand what the company's strategy is. Do they buy properties? Do they only hold them for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? If they're buying properties for 10 plus years, and so when I say 10 plus years, holding them for 10 or more years, that's a very different thought process than somebody who's buying and basically, I don't want to say flipping, but buying and holding for only 3 years. So when you're selling them products, if your product has a payback period of longer than 3 years, the company that only holds properties for 3 years may not be your best person to target. And then when it comes to CapEx and OpEx, I kind of already mentioned this earlier, but if you're selling hardware, that's a capital expenditure. If you're selling software only, that's OpEx. So you just really need to understand where your product fits in this chain and who your target audience should be. I can't tell you how many countless PropTech companies I see try to target the wrong people, try to target the wrong customers. They're just kind of wasting their time. So it's really just understanding the general industry, how the industry is laid out, who are the major players, what their intentions are, and just research them. A lot of there's a handful of companies that are public, these large REITs. Every quarter they talk about what they're doing. If you looked at some of their Q4 earnings over the past week or two, they're telling you in their earnings, hey, these are my objectives for 2024. we're focused on centralization. We're focused on cost cutting. We're focused on this and this. Like they're being pretty public about what they're trying to do and what tech they're actually implementing. So it's, in many ways, it's not a secret. They also publish corporate reports and sustainability, and they used to publish ESG reports. I'm not sure if they're still producing ESG reports, but they're producing public reports that basically tell everybody what they are working on. And a lot of companies follow these public companies because the public companies seem to operate really well. So you can kind of gauge where the industry is going based on what a lot of these companies are saying.
Nice.
And that kind of flows into my last comment about it is the adoption. I call it just the adoption cycle. Is a company an early adopter? Are they a late adopter? You can do some research yourself to understand this. Go on their property websites. How well do their property websites, show off their units? Are they using really cool technology here and there? There's a lot of research that you can do, not just about the industry, but about your target customer audience. That's pretty public, and you can really understand all of that stuff. And the last thing I want to say about this, the selling, before I answer your question about just the abundance of PropTech, is just the seasonal sales cycle. Obviously everybody kind of budgets in the fall, and they try to get as much budgeting stuff done and approved before, the holiday time comes. And multifamily, also follows that. So if you are selling a CapEx product, you really need to focus a lot of energy to get into that budget during that time frame, because if you don't, it's going to make it really difficult to try to deploy anything if you're not in the next year's budget, because a couple $1 million just doesn't come out of nowhere for these companies. If you're selling software and you're replacing an existing tool, then it's not really it's just a switch of a SKU. It's not a major change in the actual cost of anything. That's not really impacted much by the budget, unless there's a major costs to switch. But when it comes to hardware and CapEx, you really need to be paying attention and being in line with your customer and their seasonal budgeting process. And the last note on that is, when you're deploying the technology, really understand what your customer is okay with in terms of timing. Do they want to deploy during the winter? Are they okay with deploying over holidays? Or do they want to wait for the summertime? There's a lot of turnover. This turnover season in multifamily is the summer months. So do they want to install stuff when units are vacant? Or do they not want to disrupt the property team because there's more work usually when units turn over? So you got to really understand all these things about what your target customer wants. And it's a lot of work, but look, you can do some research and you can figure it out.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, I want to answer your question about the abundance of PropTech, and you've seen, and I think Matt also talked about this a couple of days ago. During the ZERP era, when there was a ton of money going after PropTech companies, if you had a good deck and a good idea, you could basically get money. So you saw a lot of saturation in various product segments in the space. And I think what you're going to see, and yes, that is harder for some of these companies, especially if they don't have a lot of in-house resources. So you put a lot of effort on one person to go and say, all right, which CRM or which chatbot should I choose? There's 20 of these. How do I make the right decision? Right. The truth is, it's tough. They've got to go potentially take 20 meetings and do 20 demos if they want to do the right research. There are a couple tools out there that are aggregating and giving you insights on some of these. But the reality is, it is tough. The one thing I will say, I'm not sure if this is necessarily a good thing, but you're going to start to see some consolidation of these tools. There's a lot of PropTech that came out in the 2018 to 2022 years. I don't think all of those PropTech companies are going to survive. Last year was there. You saw some shutdowns last year and some consolidation. You'll probably see that too this year. So I think for the customers I wouldn't want to say they're late adopters, but they've maybe waited to deploy a particular product category. They may be a beneficiary of seeing, okay, who is the winners now? Who came out on top, and I don't have to go listen to 20 product demos. I can go and listen to 5 now, and then go pick from those 5. So.
Got it. Yeah. I am inundated with many landscapes. Have you seen tech landscape for residential for multifamily, for single family. It just
It's
blows away my mind just to see
it's
the
it's overwhelming. Yeah, it's
overwhelming.
overwhelming.
And what you are saying is, with this overwhelm comes a point where the market consolidates. There will be fewer players, or there will be mergers and acquisitions of companies, and then I think the survival of the fittest and the biggest, something of that sort. Am I right?
Yeah, there's certain product categories that have still had low penetration. The inverse of that is property management systems, where like Yardi and Real Page is used. Almost every property management company uses some sort of core accounting system now. It took them decades to do that. There's not a lot of mom and pop property managers they're still using Excel sheets. Surprisingly, there are. But just kind of based on that product category, you can kind of get a gauge. When we started this discussion, the eras of PropTech, the newer eras, those are just still lower adoption. Those there might be availability of saturation in those newer markets because the penetration of those products is still pretty relatively low. Even the smart building products that I built and we were talking about, that's still, I believe, like under a 10% penetration in the market. So there's still opportunity out there. So that's kind of a general statement, obviously. It's probably unhealthy to have 20 choices. I don't think it's possible for, truly to have 20 CRM systems all try to fight for the same customers. I think that's a little bit too many. I think you're seeing that now with chatbots. There's like 20 chatbots out there. They're all doing some fairly similar stuff. They're all kind of fighting for the same customers. So I think competition is good, but sometimes too much competition can become an issue when it comes to choice for property management companies.
Right. And to be fair, in spite of abundance, in spite of overwhelm, innovation needs to happen. So there will always be some new player coming in with something, solving it better, disrupting something. So the listeners who are listening, who might be the next founders or so, instead of getting disappointed about the overwhelm, what would be your advice to them if they are entering into trying to solve a problem into this landscape? What would your advice be on what kind of problems they should choose to solve for multifamily, and what are some of the strategies that they should take to succeed?
Yeah, what I like to start off, and this may be, this might be like the outlook of what's going on, into the future. Just really where take a step back from technology for a second and just kind of look at what's going on macro in the industry, and you can kind of get some clues on what's needed from a tech perspective. And I'll kind of name three things that are going on in the general multifamily space that are issues. Number one, rent growth is slowed pretty dramatically. It's even compressed in some markets. And I can talk about what that means for tech. Number two is there's an oversupply of Class A products. So Class A is luxury. And a lot of Sunbelt cities, Phoenix being one of them. I'm in Phoenix here. There's a lot of overbuilt new construction there. And that was a delay from the pandemic. So a lot of stuff was supposed to come online 2 years ago. It's now coming online. So it's an oversupply. And then lastly, there's still a lot of bad debt from the pandemic, from bad behavior. So people not paying rent, fraudulent fraud, identity fraud, and some eviction stuff has still kind of not necessarily made its way out of the system yet. So kind of, if you look at those three things, when rent growth slows, people start to look at how to cut expenses. It's a very cyclical thing in the industry where when rents are going up, the revenue management team kicks in and they're like, hey, how can I figure out how to, make more money? How can I charge residents more? How can I increase my revenues? When rents start slowing down or even flattening, then the expense management team kicks into gear and how can I reduce expenses? So that's just kind of like a general statement. If you think about that, now you can kind of see like where the products kind of come into play. If expenses are worried about, think about how you can lower expenses with technology.
Nice.
When you talk about oversupply, you're going to see concessions from a lot of these developers. They're going to get desperate to lease up their buildings pretty quickly. A lot of their loans have matured actually, because they were supposed to launch their building 2 years ago. So they're almost a couple of years late, and they've had to refinance or push their loan maturity dates out, which can be a problem. So they're going to get desperate. They're going to do a lot of rent concessions, but they're also potentially going to add an additional amount of services to the building. So if they didn't have managed Wi-Fi in the building planned, 2 years ago, I hope they have a plan now. If they haven't put in a smart home system or a smart access control system, these are amenities that residents will pay more for. So if you're not doing those things, and if you weren't doing those things 2 years ago and you're still not doing them, you're in trouble, I think. But if you haven't launched your building yet, you may have time to put some of these new tech features in. So you can kind of get an idea of where these things are going based on the macro. And the bad debt thing, there's a lot of issues with evictions and there's a lot of issues with identity fraud. There's great technology out there that can solve some of these things, make the eviction process better. There's a lot of great technology to identify fraud, prevent fraud. So that's where you can kind of see some of these trends going. I have a lot of other things to say about other trends in the industry, but that's kind of just like the general statement about, for an entrepreneur or a new founder, if you're trying to find, a way in, just look at the macro trends in the industry. And I like to think about it to try to put myself in the CEO's shoes. And I read, I listen to their earnings reports, especially the public earnings reports, and like, what is keeping up these CEOs at night? And right now, it's rent growth is slowing. If you're building in these oversupply markets, obviously you're stressed because you're not sure if these buildings are going to be successful. And if you still have bad debt on the books, that's always a stress that keeps these CEOs at night. So if you can get in their heads and think about what they're stressing about and build a product that solves their problems, you should be good.
Got it. I can imagine because every podcast gets translated into a couple of articles on our media channel. So I think I can imagine the title would be "How to Sell to Multifamily," and this will take some nuggets from what you just shared. But I still have some questions. Okay, so so you are asking them to look at the macros, look at the trends, and try to solve for the trends. And then what? So they have an MVP. Where do they go? Do they go to conferences? Who do they pitch? Who do they talk to get their first early adopters of their MVPs?
Yeah, it's tough. You have, in many ways, it's pay to play for some of these things. Each of the major conferences has kind of like a startup package where it's affordable for you to get in front of people. I believe the NMHC has even a contest every year, and so you can kind of enter that contest as a startup, at least gets them to be on stage. But it kind of goes back to my earlier statement about finding customers. If you truly have a good product that solves an issue and you're good at selling it, you're good at pitching yourself, just go out there and talk to the industry. You can talk, if you're selling a product to renters, go talk to renters. It's not illegal to go talk to renters. You can go talk to renters about the product. Go talk to them. Go put a website up. Go get some feedback on this product. If you're selling to property managers, go walk into a property, into a leasing office. Some of them are, moving away from on-site staff, and I want to talk about, that as a trend in a minute. But if they're still on site, go talk to them, or call them, get their feedback. But yes, there are a variety of ways that they can get themselves out there. But I think one of the easiest for me is to figure out obviously who you're selling to. If you're selling to a renter, or you're selling to the property staff, or you're selling to corporate, just go and try to talk to them. It's pretty easy to go drive around to an apartment building. They're everywhere. So you can figure out what, if your product is truly solving their issue, and you can get some feedback. Give your product out for free. Let people test it. That shouldn't hurt you at all.
Got it. And then there is a difference between point solutions and trying to be part of an ecosystem. Okay, so every, in multifamily at least, the property management space has ecosystems, has big integration players, and then these startups who are trying to solve a very tiny piece. Somebody's trying to solve a finance module, somebody's trying to solve the rent roll module and stuff like that. How do you think they should fit in? Should they talk to the bigger integration players and offer their services for free? Like how should that conversation be?
Yeah, it's definitely okay to start being a point solution. I think everybody kind of has to start somewhere. You can't just, go out and build everything all at once.
Right.
So that's, it's just naturally you start out as a point solution. I think when it comes to integrating and working with the large property management systems, they typically all want you to already have, like a sponsor mutual customer.
Yeah.
And so you can start to build your product just around their architecture. So when you do come time to actually integrating with that, with one of the property management systems, it's easier for you to do so. So as long as you've, decided to architect it in the way that they've architected it, and you find that mutual customer, you can at least integrate more easily. But that's typically the relationship with a lot of these larger ecosystems. Is they typically want you to be more of an integration partner versus more of a business partner in your earlier years. So that's really the option to working. When I say working with them, is to interacting with them. Is to really be more, is to integrate more, and then maybe there's an opportunity later on to be more of a business, have a business relationship.
Got it. Excellent. Now let's so we understood the past. We made sense of how things have evolved. We understood the present and the challenges. Let's try also to gaze into the crystal ball, as they say. Where do you see the future of tech in multifamily evolving? Okay, we're talking about AI. We are talking about shifting macros and the industry trends. Give us a sense of the future in maybe in the next 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think we can, let's address the elephant in the room, AI. It's obviously extremely hyped everywhere, not just real estate. I think it's kind of funny. I mean, it's been around for a long time. But ever since ChatGPT came out about 18 months ago, it's been extremely hyped. But in multifamily, we've seen it. There's been chatbots around for a while. I think what's interesting over the last year with AI's impact is just the overall compute power and the abilities of these large language models. And they're getting better and better every day. I'm not sure if you saw what Gemini is touting, just basically being able to process a LLM that's almost 7 times the size of ChatGPT 4s. I mean, it's pretty crazy, the iteration speed that's happening kind of in the infrastructure side of AI. So let's talk about what that really means in multifamily, because I don't think most property managers really just can grapple what that actually means for them. I think in the initial short term, in the initial year, you're going to start to see communication, whether it's around leasing and maintenance and just overall communication between prospects and renters, become very, very automated, but in a really good way, in my opinion. This kind of plays into the term centralization that you may have heard, and is pretty much the buzzword around multifamily for the past year or two. And the centralization, before I go into the AI stuff, the centralization is kind of an offspring of what happened with the pandemic, where leasing offices closed, it became harder to hire labor, to retain labor, and it's been basically forcing these large property management companies to centralize their operations. What does that mean at the surface? It means to bring more control and power and more operational stuff centrally, where historically it was very decentralized. You had property managers, you had leasing agents, you had maintenance staff all on site. They reported up into some hierarchy, eventually into corporate, but it was pretty decentralized. So centralization just simply means, bringing more of those people into the central corporate environment. You're seeing some of these pods where you'll have multi-site managers, or neighborhoods, as one company calls it, where there's a couple people and they manage 3 or 4 properties close by. But a lot of the more historical operations are actually brought away from the property. So let's talk about what that means when it comes to AI and how that can improve with communications. I'll give you an example. You can take all of your marketing content that you've produced historically. So property management companies got a ton of marketing content. You can put that all into one of these large language models, and it can spit out amazing personalized email content for prospects. So when a prospect emails or calls or chats into the system, a human doesn't need to be involved, and the LLM can spit out amazing personalized content for them to keep them super engaged and ultimately to help them and push them to rent the unit. And so all of that is already being applied. You're starting to see that get better and better every day with some of these chatbots and communication CRM systems. So I think that's one of the very near term things we're seeing. On the kind of the opposite, on the further end of that, once the prospect becomes a resident, the same stuff is happening with maintenance. So your entire standard operating procedure documents on, if this issue comes up with a resident, how to solve it, whether it's a maintenance issue, whether it's a complaint about something, whether it's a legal issue, whatever that may be. Most of these companies have really expansive, comprehensive SOPs, standard operating documents and procedures. You can put those into an LLM. And when a resident phones in or emails in or chats in, there's this really intelligent and personalized decision tree and conversation that can happen, completely automated, no human, and probably be better, accurate, higher quality of a conversation for the renter. So the satisfaction of this renter's problem getting solved is likely going to be higher because of the intelligence of the LLM being able to solve their problem quickly and accurately. So those are really the near-term things we're seeing, and the industry is very much finally moving into this centralization trend. It's gone from a buzzword a year or two ago, and it's now going into mainstream practice. Again, if you listen to some of these large public real estate operating companies and their earnings calls, they're talking about this centralization, backed by AI, backed by AI, backed by AI. That's the big hype.
Got it.
The other,
yeah.
If you look, and then the second piece to all of this, another major trend that's finally, I'm super excited about this, is sustainability. This, and then there's obviously some AI components around sustainability in multifamily, but we're finally seeing sustainability be taken seriously, as I would call it. I think for a few years, ESG was a trend. It was a marketing term, but there wasn't a whole lot of compliance or laws or anything like that was forcing people. There was some funding and some financing mechanisms that were backing ESG companies and whatnot, but it was in my opinion, is a little bit fluffy. This is the first year where I think we're going to see some serious movement on sustainability. And you can thank New York City for this with local law 97 that goes into effect this year. They passed it, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, but it actually goes into effect this year in terms of compliance, which means that buildings over a certain size, I think it's 50,000 square feet, have to reduce their energy production or the greenhouse gas emissions by, I think it's like 40%. And then outside of New York, there's several other cities and several other states between 2025 and 2026 years where those states will be they'll be putting into regulation very similar laws to New York, where buildings over certain sizes have to comply with energy consumption, water reduction. So I think you're going to see a lot of movement on the sustainability side. I'm actually, quick little plug, I'm advising a company called Conservation Labs, and they make a sensor that wraps around a pipe. It's a non-invasive sensor, and it can track really intelligent water flows going through the pipe. So basically, listen to the audio data. It can break the audio data down into various different water signatures, and it can detect not only catastrophic leaks, it can detect leaks behind walls, and it can make custom conservation recommendations on fixtures that might be inefficient. And this can save people 15, 20 or more % on their usage of water and energy. So with this device alone, potentially you can get to half of your required compliance in New York. So that device, and there's a lot of others. There's a lot of great reporting systems now that track all of your sustainability and energy production and water reduction. And so I think that's going to be a massive trend starting this year and going into the next couple of years. And you'll see that regionally, wherever there's laws, and New York City is obviously a big area with a ton of real estate is there. California's got some of those laws. Maryland's a big area. Seattle, Denver. There's a lot of cities and states that are going to be adopting this over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Well, this brings us to the end of a very, very insightful conversation. Usually, when I am having a conversation, my mind is always thinking of which clip should I use to promote it on LinkedIn. Okay, I usually look for a clip, but you were bam, bam, bam. You are like lots of knowledge bombs, lots of experience coming there, high value. And now I'm thinking, high competition. It will be hard for me to choose which of the small snippet that I used for promotion. But hey, this comes from your experience, from that you have earned the hard way all through your life, and I think people are gonna love this. All those people who have not yet watched this live, they're gonna love this conversation. We are gonna transcribe this into some really high valuable content pieces as well for text, so people will be finding it as well. So, hey, Mitch, thank you so much for your time and sharing with us your experience. In fact, you worked so hard to prepare for this. Very few of my guests work hard diligently, and you were always on top, ensuring that you do a high value conversation and add value to our listeners. So, thank you for that, and hope to have you again, because I'm not gonna let you go with. I think there is so much of more wisdom that you can share to the community. With that, thanks again, Mitch.
Thank you, Ravi. Great to be here.
See you around. Bye bye.